So what was it like to get Jack and Vinny back out there today?
Great. Jack, obviously his skill level is, fun to be around, and Vinny's no slouch there either. He plays at such a high tempo. Vinny is a personality that he's such a competitor, and we've missed him in that regard and what he brings. Kajula brings that, and Gergensen. They drag guys into the fight type of mentality. And so that fierce component is part of Vinny's DNA, and it is nice to think that he's really close to getting in the lineup. It won't be tomorrow, but possibility the next game.
I was going to say they're both in non-contact, so Friday or Sunday would be feasible for both of them.
It is, yep. Yeah, and we'll know. I mean, they were great today. So the information that we got today was couldn't have been any better. They pushed it pretty hard today, and they were taking contact today, even though it was, no, they were in physical battles. So that is really good news. I suspect when I do talk to them and the medical team when they get off that it'll be a good report.
So Jack is going to stay up. He's not going to go back down throughout this.
Yeah, you know what, Paul? The roster is there's lots of details, intricacies that I don't know with respect to the roster. So anything is possible in that regard. Obviously, activating guys and you have to have spots, and how that lays out is something I cannot speak to in regard.
You had mentioned Jack will continue to learn while he was out. That's what young guys do. What do you hope he learns? Or have you talked to him about what he learned?
Yeah, we actually watched some film, he and I, a couple of times, and the power of observation, he uses that well. I mean, if you think about it, all the guys that are the star players in the league right now idolized somebody when they were growing up, and they were fixated on the TV screen or at a game or at a rink watching, those players that were older than them, and internalizing what they saw, creating a vision for themselves. And I think Jack has done just that in his career, and he did that through this injury, watching us and seeing our challenges as a team, and his teammates' challenges. I know he's internalized that to use it as a real positive coming back. I just know it. So he's got to get back into game shape, but I think he'll come out of this better than how he went in it.
Does Henry had to have a surgery or anything? Or?
Henry does not at this point. I don't think there's any thought of that at this point at all. And the hope is he's listed, I believe, week to week, which could even mean the end of this week. But we need to see, and the medical team does, how he's responding to treatments, and then we'll be able to make a better determination, where that week to week sits. But it's still there's still a short-term hope there, and a short-term focus, which is, again, it's week to week, but it could be within a week. He's on our active roster, I believe, still for that purpose.
You've been putting a center at wing. As far as Casey today, why is that a good start? I don't think he isn't quite with himself.
Yeah, he's. I mean, it's easy to be, transparent. We all see it. He's not himself yet. He's pushing hard. He's working hard. There's no doubt in my mind that he is, but he hasn't played a lot of hockey in the last 7 to 10 months. And, other guys are in mid-season form, and he's not. And, the injury was, in the midsection, which is the core, and, that moves everything. Your core is everything, and especially in hockey. So, it's taking him time. I think that his biggest challenge is to deal with the frustration, with his personally high standard. He has a high standard and high expectations of himself, and he's going to battle that right now because he just can't physically do yet what he could do before the injury, before the recovery. But it's you work through it, and you just keep. I think he's getting better each game. He'd been at center. We've had Krebs on the wing, and Krebs is obviously been a center his whole career. So I figured, let's just make that shift. Give Peyton that opportunity and maybe give Middlestead a little bit more support until he gets feeling more like himself. And that was all of what went into it.
Don, I wasn't gonna, but I probably expect what your answer is gonna be, but we're at March 1st, and knowing where this team is at, you've been good at deflecting against the big picture thing and focusing on the next game. This team is probably not gonna make the playoffs, more than likely. What is your message then to the team, and without having to mention that, and what do you want to see from this team over these last 2 months of the season?
Yeah, I think where we're at with our team is, there's still there's still individual errors, as there is every night in the NHL with every team and every player. But I feel that the systematic errors are much fewer, much further in between, which means we really, it's not a matter of system teaching or system. It's a matter of us getting better so we can execute better at a faster pace, at a higher level. And so those two things, one is the focus, the other one being the system is not a concern. I think the concern is now elevating compete. And I'll use a clear example. We can look at all of us can look at one clear example that fits maybe what I said better than how I said it, is Thompson's line. And Thompson, Tuck, and Skinner. They have set themselves to the point where they are almost ready to establish themselves as a top line in this league. But to do that, you have to be consistent. You have to set a tone in the first minute of the game, not rise to the level of the game in the last minute of the game. And that's kind of how, it's happened too often. They've elevated, but it's too late. And so that's kind of a microcosm of what we're trying to do with every guy in all positions, but they're an easy visual for us. We want them to be a top line in the NHL, but at the start of the St. Louis game and the start of the Dallas game, they're the ones that have to set the tone. And I felt they did a better job getting better as the game went. You can't do that. You want to become a top line player. You have to do that and make that impact when the puck drops at 7:00 or the start of the game. And so that will be areas that we need to challenge. So there's, when you look at the season and how do you keep guys focused, there's so much right at hand, such as that the guys don't get too far ahead of themselves. They don't get too down. You can't get too down. There's so much immediate that there is for them to focus on that it keeps them in the moment for the most part.
I wanted to ask you about that line, and you bring it up on your own. They're all elevated now at a higher level in their career, and they have to deal with those matchups. So some of the scoring has tailed off, and defensively in these last 6 games, they've really struggled at times. I mean, how do you balance? Those are the guys who need to score, but they need to, like tomorrow, deal with Matthews and Marner and whoever.
Yeah, it is. That is the next phase of really development for them. So Thompson has developed, and Tuck has clearly developed through his career to develop their skill, their ability to, in a moment, as I said, moments. We're seeing moments of great execution that are moments, and we need more moments more consistently, and that's part of the process. So you have Thompson, and again, I'll say even Alex Tuck, because if Vegas lost, it was really challenging to blame Alex Tuck. If Jeff Skinner doesn't score, Jeff Skinner gets blamed for not scoring. Let's face it, the contract he's on, the history that he's had. So he's dealt with that pressure. And then if we turn to Thompson and Tuck, they haven't dealt with that pressure yet. They've been fortunate. They've been in a fortunate luxury of just being able to be happy to be here. And now that's not good enough. And they want to be top guys, and they have to not only, as you mentioned, Mike, it's a great observation. They're commanding the respect of the other team, which means the top defensive pairing and the top checking line are salivating, waiting to play against them. It's their challenge to shut them down. So do they press to score, or do they can't press to score, but they also have to make sure they aren't a liability by pressing to score. So it's more of a matter of, okay, we know they can score, but now it's about winning. Now can we compete to win, and that might be putting the puck behind the D instead of trying to toe drag or make a play. And that's a learning process that they have to engage in, that we're going to make sure they're engaging in right now as coaches. Like I said, we've gotten Thompson to the point he knows he can be a top line guy in this league, but now there's other details to become that top line guy. You can do it, but we're going to pay attention to the details of how you do it now. If that makes sense.
What are you thinking when you're playing a team that last week scored 10 goals in a game and in the same game gave up 7? What do you think when you see a team like that, when it happens like that with 17 goals?
It's interesting, Paul, because sometimes those teams like Colorado and Tampa are much easier to play against, in the sense of, I've always said it's hard to score goals in this league. And so when a team is tight checking and they want to keep a game 1-0, 2-1, it is hard to score goals. But when you have teams that believe they can score, they give you a lot of opportunity to score goals. They play a run and gun style, or they open up the game, and they, like anybody else, becomes more vulnerable. As we mentioned, they're concentrating on scoring. That takes their concentration away from defending. So you have to be able to jump on those opportunities. And I use that Tampa game as a perfect example. We were down, I think it was 3-0 at the end of the first. We had 3 breakaways. It could have been 3-3, but we never scored to put Tampa on their heels. And, we didn't send them in their locker room saying, hey guys, we can't give up 3 breakaways. They probably didn't even talk about that because they weren't vulnerable. So I would say, you have an easier opportunity at offense when you have teams that run and gun. But if you don't cash in, you're going to be put on your heels pretty soon. And that's probably the biggest challenge when you have teams that aren't afraid to open it up.